Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning. Best wishes for all of us. Welcome back to the parallel session of the third Isotobat 2026 International Conference. Isotobat 2026 was organized by the Directorate of Strategic Studies and Academic Reputation of IPB University. And please let me introduce myself. My name is Nabila, and I will be your Master of Ceremony for today's parallel session under the subtheme Agriculture, Animal Sciences, Agroforestry, and Agromaritime Innovation. Thank you very much to all the presenters and participants for joining us today. And it is our pleasure to welcome our moderator for today's session, Dr. Kasita Listiarini. Good morning, Ibu.
Good morning, Miss Nabila.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for joining us today. All
Okay,
right, before
welcome.
we begin, please allow me to explain a few important rules for this session. The first one is please change your Zoom display name to the following format, paper ID underscore name. And all presenters are required to attend conference session starting from the plenary session yesterday until the end of the parallel session. Co-authors are welcome to join the conference without registration. All participants, including the presenters and audience members, are required to complete the attendance form for each session. The Google Form link will be shared by our committee in the chat box later. Each presenter will be allocated 10 minutes in total, consisting of 7 minutes for video playback and the remaining time for the Q&A session. Participants are kindly requested to keep their microphones muted while the presentation videos are being played. During the Q&A session, participants may share their opinions or ask questions by raising their hand, or you can type it in the chat box. Okay, before starting the presentation, I want to invite all of the participants to turn on the camera because we will take some documentation. Okay, I will wait a second. Please prepare your best smile. Okay, there is only one slide in my screen. All right, I will start the countdown. 3, 2, 1. All right, once again. Once again, 3, 2, 1. Okay, thank you very much. Now we proceed to the main agenda for this parallel session. But before that, let me introduce our moderator for today's session. Our moderator is Ibu Kasita Listiarini. Dr. Kasita is the lecturer in the Faculty of Animal Sciences at IPB University, and she is also an expert in several fields such as veterinary, environmental science, earth and planetary sciences, and also in the biochemistry, genetics, and molecular biology. Okay, without further ado, I invite Ibu Kasita to lead our presentation. Bu Kasita, please, the screen is yours.
Okay, thank you, Miss Nabila. Okay, can you hear my voice clearly?
Perfect.
Okay, thank you. Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, invited speaker, and participant. Welcome to the parallel session. Yeah. My name is Kasita Listiarini, and I'm honored to serve as a moderator for this session. Okay, today's session will consist of one or two main agenda, Ms. Nabila. The invited speaker is already on.
The invited speaker is not with us yet, so I think we can move to the presenters.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's the first session. Yeah, the presentation we for all participants. Yeah, which each presenter will present through a video presentation played by the operator, followed by a short discussion session. Yeah, okay. And now we will continue with the presentation session from our presenter. Each presenter will have 10 minutes in total, consisting of approximately 5 until 7 minutes for presentation and remaining time for question and discussion. Okay, the presentation video now. Okay, I will like to invite our first presenter. Okay, the first presenter is Agro Rizka Herwitaitis with the title is in vivo efficiency of supernatant based cell microbial consortium in managing Fusarium width of banana. Okay, the operator, please play the presentation video.
Thank you, moderator. Good morning, everyone. I would like to show you our research activity. The title is In Vivo Efficacy of Supernatant Based Cells Microbial Consortium in Managing Fusarium Meal of Banana. As we know that banana is one of the most popular commodity cultivated on a global scale. However, banana was affected by Fusarium oxysporum pubens, one of the most catastrophic pathogens threatening banana production globally. The use of microorganisms as biocontrol agents against plant pathogens has been extensively studied. Numerous bacterial and fungal strains have been demonstrated antagonistic activity against phytopathogenic microorganisms. The antagonistic activity of a microbe results from the production of antimicrobial compounds or secondary metabolites, which can inhibit pathogen growth by disrupting fungal cell structure and interfering with critical metabolic processes. Several studies have reported that efficiency of biocontrol products containing single microbial strains is often limited when it is exposed to the complexity of plant pathogens and variable field conditions. So the use of microbial consortia composed of compatible strains with diverse active compounds and mode of action has gained considerable interest. This is our previous research activity. The result revealed that a media containing cell-free supernatant is part of metabolic secondary metabolite from co-cultivation of Glopodia and Trichoderma inhibit for hog growth up to 6 days after treatment. So in this question, we continue the research and then we propose that our research is to investigate the in vivo efficacy of supernatant based cell microbial consortium. We abbreviated in SBS in suppressing Fusarium meal in banana seedling. The research was designed by randomized block design with 9 treatments. Each treatment consists of 4 applications and 5 plants as unit. And the source of antagonist isolates is Trichoderma and Lymphoderia. Trichoderma sp we use is PPK22, PP21, and the strain of Glopodia S10 KTR316 and S10 KTR325. The plant use is a banana, cultivar Bandungan Merah. The use is soil from Lembang. And we apply a fertilizer, which is a complete fertilizer applied every 1 week. This is the procedure for our experiment. We cultivate the mono or co-culture of the microbes and in the peptone media for 7 days, incubated at 28 degrees Celsius and horizontal shaker at 120 RPM. After 7 days, we filter the culture media and centrifugate at 6,000 RPM for 10 minutes. And then the supernatant were inoculated by dipping inoculation of the root for 15 minutes. And after 1 month, we inoculate the Fusarium for 10 gram per pot using a soil dipping method. And incubated the plant under 50% shade condition for 2 months. And the parameter of the observation is disease incidence, percentage of wilted leaf from disease severity index according to risk IRO2 2013 with slight modification, increase in plant height, increase in stem girth, and number of leaves. These are our results, and all treatments showed no significant difference. However, we observe trends that suggest a potential effect, and further replication is required. And we found that plant inoculated with PP1 had highest disease incidence, percentage of leaf, and pump disability index. However, when the PP1 co-inoculated with the S10 KTR313, we obtained that the disease incidence, percent of wilt leaf, and pump disease index low. So the lowest will and disease severity index. And the data was also supported with the effect of to the plant height, stem girth, and leaf number. We found that PP21 and S10KT through cause increase in the plant height, increase in the stem girth, increase in the leaf more than others, even with no significant difference with control or negative and other treatment. But this indicate a potential effect of the co-cultivation of both microbia. This is the performance of the plant with the severe type of symptom in healthy, mild, medium, severe in the type of the symptom of the leaf, and this is the symptom of the cone with the mild and severe. Unfortunately, we cannot put the healthy cone here, but as long they have no exploration in this path. And for the conclusion, we decide that single and co-cultivation treatment of SBL microbial will not significantly reduce percentage of wilt symptom, disease incidence, and severity index compared to untreated control. But Trichoderma IPP21 and S. Burkholderia S10 PTR313 increase plant height, circumreference, and number of leaf compared to the control. Suggestion is necessary to develop manipulation method to maintain the efficacy of secondary metabolites, and field scale evaluation is considered to confirm consistency under diverse ecological conditions.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. Okay, are there any questions from the audience? Please raise your hand, or you can chat in the chat box. You can type the question in the type box. Okay. Okay. While waiting for the audience to type their question, I have one question for you. Okay, Miss Rizka, yeah. Okay,
Yes.
Miss Rizka. Okay. Could this technology be practically applied by farmer on a large-scale banana plantation?
Thank you, Ibu Kasita, for your
Yes.
question. I think for this experiment, we cannot apply directly in the field, and it's easy for the farmer. But for the next experiment, we try to make a simple and easy and cheap method, so that the farmer then we can apply that in the field. So, but in this step, that the method is still not applicable for them now. So, but maybe we trying now to use other cheap material like
Hello. Sorry, Miss Rizka. Your
carbon
internet.
source is to not use secondary metabolism ongoing now. Now, is that okay?
Yeah,
Can
yeah,
you
yeah.
see me?
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. I think that is my opinion, and this step is not applicable now yet to the farmer, but later we now improve the method, so then the farmer can apply it in the field. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Miss Rizka. Okay. Any question from audience? Okay, Miss Alfi Inayati.
Okay, thank you, Ibu Rizka. I want to ask, did you do the compatibility test before for the Trichoderma and Bacillus, because they are from two different species? I'm afraid they will not compatible or something, so they affect on the growth. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Bu Alfi. We did that test before, and then the result, all of the microbes, that is mean Trichoderma and Burkholderia, compatible each other. So we did that in the previous experiment, and we published that result in our article. So we have published that the article. So this result, this experiment is continuing from the in vitro test. And we did the test for the compatibility among them. So we found that all of the microbes, it means Trichoderma, both of Trichoderma and both of Burkholderia, are compatible each other.
Okay, interesting. So do you grow them in the same media?
Yes, we grow first for Burkholderia in R2B media, and then Trichoderma in PDA. But when we test for the compatibility, we grow both of them in PDA media.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Okay, because the time is up, yeah. Okay, thank you, Miss Rizka and Bu Alfi, yeah. Okay. Okay, thank you for the presentation and discussion. Next, we will proceed the next presentation, the next presenter. Okay, the next presenter is Ipana Rosalia Anggit Primanugraha dalam Suprayogi with title Ethnozoological Use of Animal-Based Bioresearch in Traditional Medicine, Diversity, Utilization Patterns, and Sustainability Concern in Tropical Indonesia. Okay, dear operator, please play the next presentation video.
Good afternoon, distinguished participants, respected panelists and colleagues. This is Dawam Suprayogi, and today I will present a zoological use of resources in traditional medicine, diversity, utilization patterns, and sustainability concern in tropical Indonesia. In many rural tropical areas, access to modern healthcare remains limited, leading communities to rely on traditional medicine as a primary strategy. Animal-based bioresources form an important part of this system, yet their use is still underdocumented, particularly in terms of how they are applied in everyday practices. Existing studies often focus either on biodiversity or cultural practices, with limited integration between the two. This study addresses that gap by identifying the animal species used, describing how they are utilized, and highlighting potential sustainability concerns. This study applies a qualitative descriptive approach based on interviews, observations, and documentations, involving 45 respondents from 3 ethnic groups. The analysis focused on respondent-reported practices, aiming to capture patterns of traditional knowledge rather than species-specific measurements. The study involved 45 respondents from 3 ethnic groups: Javanese, Malay, and Sundanese. The distribution is relatively balanced, allowing representation of different knowledge systems. Key informants were selected based on their knowledge, including traditional healer and community leaders. Snowball sampling was applied, starting from key individuals and expanding through respondent referrals, until no new participants were identified. This approach allowed the study to capture patterns of traditional knowledge based on respondent-reported practices. A total of 25 animal species were identified, reflecting diverse utilization across multiple taxonomic groups. This indicates a close relationship between traditional practices and locally availability biodiversity. The Malay community shows the highest number of exclusive species, while several species are shared across groups. This suggests both diversity and overlap in knowledge system, indicating a potential knowledge exchange among communities. Several species used in traditional medicine fall under conservation concern, including vulnerable, endangered, and critical endangered categories. This indicates a potential overlap between traditional use and conservation priorities, although this study doesn't assess ecological impact directly. These results are organized into 3 aspects: material, processing, and health conditions. Whole body and meat are the most frequently used components, suggesting reliance on broadly available resources. Thermal processing methods, such as boiling and frying, dominate, indicating practical preparation approach. Meanwhile, treatments are mainly directed toward wound and infection-related conditions, reflecting common health needs. All findings are based on respondent-reported frequencies, representing pattern of traditional knowledge. These findings reflect traditional ecological knowledge, where biodiversity serves as a resources base, and knowledge systems guide how these resources are utilized. At the same time, the pattern observed appear to be shaped by accessibility and practicality in everyday use. However, this interpretation remains context-specific and descriptive, as it is based on respondent-reported practices rather than direct ecological or clinical measurement. In conclusion, this study identified 25 animal species used in traditional medicine. This study also revealed clear pattern of utilization, including the predominance of whole body and meat, the prevalence of thermal processing methods, and a focus on treating wounds and infection. Finally, the study highlights sustainability concern, as several species are associated with conservation issues. This finding emphasizes the importance of integrating traditional knowledge with a conservation perspective. Thank you for your attention. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you for the presentation. Okay, we will now open the discussion session. Okay, participants who would like to ask question may raise their hand or write their question in the chat box. Yeah. Okay, are there any question from the audience? please raise your hand, or you can type the question in the chat box. Okay, in the chat box from Mr. Yudi Adinata. Okay. Mr. Dawam, how can traditional animal-based medicine be maintained while ensuring wildlife conservation and sustainability? Mr. Dawam?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Yudi, for the question. I'm sorry, I afraid my English is not good. Yeah, traditional animal-based medicine can apply in penggunaan terbatas in rural, especially because the traditional knowledge and still practices in this area. Jika digunakan untuk I'm sorry kegunaan yang lebih luas, ini memang pasti akan mengganggu konservasi dan sustainability, terutama beberapa organisme atau jenis yang sudah masuk dalam kategori vulnerable ataupun critically endangered. I'm sorry for my English. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Dawam. Mr. Yudi? Okay. Okay, any question? Any more question? No? Okay, maybe for me, I have one. Yeah. Okay. Okay, the last question, yeah, maybe for me. What the future research direction would you recommend based on the finding of this study, Mr. Dawam? What the future research direction?
The future research adalah salah satunya untuk mendata sejauh mana pengetahuan masyarakat, tetapi tetap dengan untuk menjaga penggunaan terutama hewan. Kalau tumbuh-tumbuhan masih lebih aman digunakan, tetapi untuk hewan beberapa itu memang seperti juga yang disampaikan di grup di kolom chat, apakah ada toxic report karena berpotensi adanya toxicity dari hewan, dan mungkin juga perbedaan dari bagaimana setiap orang merespon kandungan atau bahan aktif dari pengobatan tradisional tersebut, sedangkan itu tidak diuji secara klinis. Maka next untuk penelitiannya bisa ada uji-uji klinis, beberapa sudah dilakukan yang lebih umum di tumbuhan, yang hewan lebih sedikit walaupun sudah dilakukan, tapi lebih sedikit dibandingkan yang tumbuhan obat.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Dawam. Okay, thank you for the presentation and the discussion. Next, we will proceed to the next presentation. Okay, the next presentation is from Amara Angelia Putra Utama, Julia Eiffel Roosevelt Rumbia, and Zahratul Millah, yeah. And the title is Effectiveness Test of KNO3 Solution Concentration and Soaking Duration on Germination and Viability of H-rice seed Oryza sativa L of Inpari 32 variety. Okay, the operator, please play the video.
Good afternoon, respected moderator, honorable lecturers, and all participants. First of all, I would like to thank the moderator for giving me the opportunity to present my research. My name is Amara Angelia, and I'm a student from Sultan Ageng Tirta University. This research was conducted under the supervision of Mr. Putra Utama, SPMP, as my main supervisor, and Mr. Julio Eiffel Roosevelt Rumbia, SPMP MPM, as my co-supervisor, and academically reviewed by Ms. Dr. Zahratul Millah, SPMSI. On this occasion, I would like to present my research entitled is Effectiveness Test of KNO3 Solution Concentration and Soaking Duration on Germination and Viability of HRI seeds Oryza sativa L of Infrared 32 variety. Now, I would like to begin with the background of this research. The first is research background. Rice is one of the most important staple crops in Indonesia and plays a crucial role in maintaining national food security. Based on data from Statistik Indonesia or BPS, rice production in Indonesia has slightly decreased over the past 3 years from 54.74 million tons in 2022 to 53.14 million tons in 2024. This decline indicates a potential challenge in maintaining food availability in the future. KNO3 function not only as a nitrogen source, but also as a psychological signal that active enzymes such as alpha amylase, which play an important role in breaking down food reserve in seeds. This process accelerates water uptake, activates metabolism, and improves germination performance. However, the effectiveness of KNO3 is influenced by its concentration and soaking duration. If the soaking time is too short, the treatment may not be active, while excessive soaking can lead to oxygen deficiency and damage the embryo. And then the next slide is research design. This study used a completely randomized design with 2 experimental factors. The first factor was KNO3 concentration consisting of 4 levels, 0% as a control, 3%, 5%, and 7%. The second factor was soaking duration consisting of 24 hours, 30 hours, and 36 hours. This treatment resulted in 12 combinations, and each combination was replicated 3 times, resulting in a total of 36 experimental units. Each unit consisted of 30 seeds, including 20 primary seeds and 10 reserve seeds. So the total number of seeds used in this experiment was 1,080 seeds. The collect data were analyzed using analysis of variance of ANOVA, followed by Duncan multiple range test at a 5% significant level using Dastat software. And the next slide is the result and discussion. The first is variance of analysis, the result or ANOVA. The results showed that KNO3 concentration significantly affected several parameters, including germination percentage, vigor index, growth uniformity, normal seedlings, and non-germinated seeds. However, it did not significantly affect abnormal seedlings. Soaking duration showed that a stronger effect on most parameters, indicating that it plays an important role in activating physiological process in seeds, especially in breaking dormancy. Excessive KNO3 concentration can reduce germination due to possible embryo damage. Interestingly, there was no significant interaction between KNO3 concentration and soaking duration. This means that both two factors works independently in influencing seeds performance. And then the next slide is germination percentage. Germination percentage is one of the most important indicators of seeds viability. Results showed that moderate KNO3 concentration produced better germination compared to the control. In addition, the soaking duration of 36 hours result in the highest germination percentage, indicating better water absorption and metabolic activation. Then the next slide is maximum growth potential. Maximum growth potential reflects the highest capability of seeds to grow under optimal conditions. The result indicating that both KNO3 concentration and soaking duration significantly improve this parameter. The best results were observed at higher concentration combined with a soaking duration of 36 hours. And then the next slide is germination uniformity or GU. Germination uniformity indicates how evenly seeds develop into normal seedlings. Although the difference were not statistically significant, the highest value were still observed at 36 hours soaking duration. This suggests better kernelization of seeds growth. And then the next is vigor index. The vigor index reflects the strength and quality of seedlings growth. This result showed that the soaking duration had a significant effect, while KNO3 concentration did not significantly influence this parameter. The highest vigor index were obtained at 36 hours soaking duration. And then the next slide is the percentage of normal seedlings. The percentage of normal seedlings indicates the availability of seeds to grow into healthy plants. The results showed that the soaking duration significantly increased the percentage of normal seedlings. The highest value was again observed at 36 hours soaking duration. And then the next slide is percentage of abnormal seedlings or ES. Abnormal seedling represents seeds that failed to develop properly. The results showed that both KNO3 concentration and soaking duration did not significantly affect this parameter. The percentage remained relatively low. And then the next slide is percentage of non-germinated seeds. The percentage of non-germinated seeds was significantly affected by both treatments. The highest value was found in the control treatment without KNO3. Meanwhile, KNO3 application combined with longer soaking duration reduced the number of non-germinated seeds, especially at 36 hours. The last is conclusion. In the conclusion, both KNO3 concentration and soaking duration significantly affect the germination and viability of HRI seeds. The best treatment was obtained at 3% KNO3 concentration and 36-hour soaking duration. However, there was no significant interaction between the two factors indicating independent effects. Although the treatment improves seeds performance, the figure level has not yet reached a high category. And then that is all for my presentation. Thank you for my supervisor, lecturers, and all participants for your attention. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Okay, Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you for the presentation. Okay, we will now open the discussion session. Participant who would like to ask question may raise your hand or write the question in the chat box. Okay, there are one question in the chat box from Miss Ananda Carmelia. Okay, Miss Amara, why was there no significant interaction between KNO3 concentration and soaking duration in most parameters observed in the study? Okay, please, Miss Amara.
Okay, thank you for the question. The absence of interaction indicates that KNO3 concentration and soaking duration its work independently in influencing seeds germination and viability. And then the KNO3 mainly function as a chemical stimulant that actives germination-related metabolism, while soaking duration mainly affects water uptake during imbibition because both factors have different physiological roles. Increasing one factor did not necessarily strengthen the effect of the other factor. This result suggests that optimization of KNO3 concentration and soaking duration should be evaluated separately to obtain the most effective treatment for arthritis. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. How was Mr. Ananda? Has it been answered? Your question, Miss Ananda? Okay, thank you. Okay, we move to the next question from Mr. Yudi Adinata. Okay, Miss Amara, what is the physiological role of KNO3 in improving the germination of HI seed?
Okay, thank you for the question. KNO3 as a potassium nitrate is plays an important physiological role in improving the germination of HRI seeds because it can stimulate metabolic activity and break seeds dormancy. And then the nitrate component acts signaling molecular that promotes enzyme activation, increase respiration, and enhance water absorption during germination. Meanwhile, potassium nitrate can help regulate osmotic balance and enzyme function within the seeds. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Okay, Mr. Yudi. Okay, clear. I understand. Okay. Okay, thank you, Miss Amara. Because the time is up, yeah, we will proceed to the next presentation. Okay, thank you, Mr. Amara. Okay, the next presenter. The next presenter is Diah Purnamawati, Nunik Hermita, Endang Sulistyorini Dwi Firnia, with the title is Diversity and Dominance of Soil Fauna in Various Stand Type in Benteng Taro Cultivation. Okay, the operator, please play the video.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Dia Purnamawati. I am from University of Sultan Ageng Tirtayasa, and I will be presenting my study on diversity and dominance of soil fauna in various plant types, Benteng Taro cultivation, Santosoma undipes K. Koch. Research background. Benteng Taro has the potential to be developed as an alternative local food source in Banten, and the development of Benteng Taro has the potential to become a leading local economic commodity. The type of stand can influence the diversity of soil fauna within a given area. Different stand types lead to variations in microclimate conditions, litter availability, and soil moisture, which in turn affect the activity and diversity of soil fauna. Therefore, it is important to conduct identification and analysis across several stand types in Taro cultivations area, as the diversity of soil fauna in this area has not been extensively studied. Research design. Sampling was carried out using the purposive sampling method based on observation at the 3 land locations, and sampling was conducted using the pitfall trap method at 10 points within each of the 3 stand types, resulting in a total of 30 observation plots. Transect lines of 100 meters were established with sampling points placed at 10-meter intervals. Sampling was carried out directly in taro fields or around taro plants. Soil sampling was carried out at the 3 research locations taken from several points and then composite. Stand type. This research was conducted on 3 types of stands in the cultivations area of Benteng Taro. The first was Benteng Taro with thick stand, the second Benteng Taro with mixed stand, and the third Benteng Taro with banana tree stands. Parameter research, composition of soil fauna, diversity index, dominance index, PCA analysis, environmental parameters, chemical properties of soil, and microclimate conditions. Result and discussion. This is the table of composition of soil fauna. The total soil fauna found was 188 individuals. The highest number was found in banana stands with 79 individuals consisting of 9 families, mixed stand with 59 individuals consisting of 10 families, and thick stands with 50 individuals consisting of 7 families. The soil fauna were found in 10 pitfall trap plots in all stands. The soil fauna most commonly found in each stand are Formicidae, Anisolabidide, Gnaphosidae, Araneidae, and Staphylinnidae. Diversity index and dominance index. The analysis used to determine soil fauna diversity in this study is the Shannon-Weiner diversity index, and soil fauna dominance is calculated using Simpson-Odum dominance index. Based on the table, thick stand have a low diversity index category, mixed stand have a moderate diversity index category, as do banana stands. However, the highest diversity index value is found in thick stand, which is 1.65. Based on the table, thick stand have a fairly high dominance index with a value of 0.68. Mixed stand have a low dominance index category with a value of 0.28, and banana stand have a moderate dominance index with a value of 0.55. Soil chemical analysis. The soil chemical parameters analyzed in this study are organic C, organic matter, pH, and total N. The soil organic carbon in each stand type falls into the low category. In thick stands, the organic carbon value is 1.74%. In mixed stands, it is 1.89%, and in banana stands, it is 1.34%. This considered low. The total nitrogen value in thick stand is 0.34 which falls into the high category. In mixed stands, the total nitrogen value is 0.24% and falls into the medium category, while in banana stands, it is 0.10%, which is low, indicating nutrient limitations in the soil. The soil pH in thick and banana stand is slightly acidic, with the pH value in thick stands at 5.70 and in banana stands at 5.75, whereas in mixed stands it is 6.85, considered neutral. The soil temperature in the mixed stand is 24 Celsius, lower compared to the thick stand, which has an average temperature of 26.4 Celsius, and in the banana stand, which has an average of 26 Celsius, the average soil moisture in the three stands show relatively homogeneous values, namely 52-54. The soil light intensity is highest at 1,500 lux in the banana stand, a value much higher than in the mixed stand and thick at lux. PCA analysis. The analysis result indicate that mixed stand have a better soil ecosystem condition compared to the two other stand. This is due to the medium category of soil fauna diversity, but having the highest quantitative value among other stand and low dominance, supported by adequate levels of suitable organic matter and stable moisture. Mixed stands have soil fauna diversity with a moderate category and low dominance. Thick stands show a low diversity index and high dominance, while banana stands show a moderate diversity index and moderate dominance. This is supported by the soil cyclical conditions and the most stable microclimate conditions, characterized by nearly neutral pH, lower temperature, stable relative humidity, and low light intensity. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. There are questions in the chat box. The first question from Miss Amara. Okay, wait. Thank you for your presentation, Miss Dia. I want to ask you, the question is, if the highest number of soil fauna individual is found in banana stand, why are mixed stand actually considered to have the best ecosystem condition? In addition, can soil fauna diversity be used as an indicator of ecosystem quality? Mr. Dia, Miss Dia. Hello, Miss
Okay.
Dia.
Thank you for the question. Mixed stand have a moderate diversity index with low dominance, meaning the fauna community is more stable and not dominated by a particular species. In addition, the microclimate conditions and soil chemical properties in mixed stand also better support ecosystem stability. Soil fauna are very sensitive to environmental change. Soil fauna are influenced by environmental conditions such as abiotic factor and biotic factors, and can reflect the conditions of the soil ecosystem. The better the environmental conditions, the more species of fauna are able to live. There be increasing biodiversity.
Okay, Miss Amara, has it been answered? Miss Amara? Okay, thank you. It's clear. Okay, the next question from Miss Ananda Carmelia. Miss Dia, from your research result, why do Formicidae become the most dominant soil fauna found in all types of stand, and how does microclimate condition affect the presence of and abundance and Formicidae in each stand?
Oh, okay. The high frequency of occurrence of formicide indicates a high adaptability to various soil environmental conditions. Formicide are known as soil fauna that are tolerant of habitat disturbance and capable of utilizing various food sources. So they often dominate soil fauna communities in an area. Formicide can adapt to various habitat and environmental conditions, including in disturbed environments or lands. Microclimate condition greatly affect the presence of formicide, especially temperature, humidity, light intensity, and layer conditions. Warm temperatures generally increase an activity in foraging and reproduction. Suitable soil moisture also supports the sustainability of colonies as it helps maintain stable condition.
Okay, thank you. Miss Ananda, has it been answered? Is it clear? Okay, thank you for the last question from Mr. Yudi Adinata. Ms. Dia, can soil fauna diversity be considered a reliable indicator of soil health in banning taro cultivation?
Okay, thank you for the question. Yes, soil fauna diversity can be considered a reliable indicator of soil health in banning taro cultivation because soil fauna play important roles in decomposition, nutrient cycling, soil aeration, and organic matter formation. A higher diversity of soil fauna generally indicates better soil conditions, including good moisture, sufficient organic matter, stable microclimate, and minimal environmental disturbance. In banning taro cultivation, the presence of diverse soil fauna suggests that the soil ecosystem is functioning well and is capable of supporting plant growth sustainability. However, soil fauna diversity should not be used as the only indicator of soil health. It is better combined with other parameters such as soil pH, organic carbon content, moisture, temperature, and nutrient availability to obtain a more comprehensive assessment of soil quality. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, great answer, clear. Okay, thank you. Okay, because the time is up, thank you, Ms. Dia, for the presentation and the discussion. And then we will move to the next presentation. Okay, the next presenter. The next presenter is from UNASVI, Dea Cornelia Huta Barat, Budi Utomo, Afifudin Dalimunte, Ipani Enggar Susetya, with the title is Heavy Metal Contamination in Rhizophora apiculata Ecosystem, a comparative study between two coastal areas in North Sumatra. Okay, the operator, please play the video.
Hi everyone, my name is Dea Cornelia Huta Barat from the University of North Sumatra. Today I will present our research entitled Mangrove Under Pressure. Heavy metal accumulation of CoO and PV in Rhizophora apiculata from industrial and conservation coastal areas in North Sumatra. The study focused on the impact of heavy metal pollution on mangrove ecosystem and the important role of Rhizophora apiculata in polluted coastal environments. Mangrove ecosystems are very important because they provide coastal protection, carbon storage, and habitat for marine biodiversity. However, industrial and maritime activities release heavy metals such as copper or CoO, lead or PP into coastal environments. These heavy metals are toxic, persistent, and harmful to marine organisms and ecosystem stability. Interestingly, Rhizophora apiculata has the ability to absorb and accumulate pollutants, making this species important for environmental protection and phytoremediation. This research had three main objectives. First, To compare Ku and PB, concentration between Belawan, which represent an industrial area, and Langkat, which represents a conservation area. Second, to analyze the distribution of heavy metals in seawater, sediment, and mangrove dishes. Third, to evaluate the phytoremediation potential of Rhizopora apiculata using the bioconcentration factor or BCF analysis. The study was conducted at 2 different coastal ecosystems in North Sumatra. The first location was Belawan, specifically Pulau Sijanang. This area is highly influenced by industrial waste, port activities, and shipping operation. Therefore, it experienced high anthropogenic pressure. The second location was Langkat, specifically Pulau Sembilan, which is considered a conservation-based ecosystem with lower industrial disturbance and more natural environmental conditions. These two locations were selected to compare polluted ecosystem and relatively natural mangrove ecosystem. The research methodology consisted of 3 main stages. First was sampling. We collected samples of seawater, surface sediment, and mangrove tissues, including fibrous roots, stilt roots, and bark. Second was laboratory analysis. All samples were dried, ground, and analyzed using wet destruction with nitric acid and percolic acid. Heavy metal concentration were then measured using atomic absorption spectrophotometry or AAS. Finally, the data were analyzed to determine heavy metal concentration and bioconcentration factor values. The results showed that PB concentration in seawater exceeded Indonesian quality standards in both locations. However, Belawan shows significantly higher heavy metal accumulation compared to Langkat. For Ku accumulation, Belawan reached 3.24 milligrams per kilogram, while Langkat only reached 1.72 milligrams per kilogram. These findings indicate that industrial and maritime activities in Belawan strongly contribute to heavy metal pollution in coastal ecosystem. This slide explains the metal barrier mechanism in Rhizopora apiculata. The distribution pattern of heavy metals followed this order: fibrous roots and stilt roots and then bark. This means that the highest accumulation occurred in the roots. The highest Ku concentration was found in fibrous roots in Belawan, reaching 1.33 milligrams per kilogram. This happens because mangrove roots directly interact with contaminated sediment and act as biological metal barrier. The roots trap heavy metals underground and reduce their movement to upper plant tissues. As a result, the plant is able to protect its physiological function and survive in polluted environments. Environmental conditions strongly affected heavy metal accumulation in the study. Belawan show ecosystem degradation caused by industrial waste, port activities, habitat fragmentation, and high anthropogenic pressure. This condition result in higher heavy metal accumulation. In contrast, Langkat had better water quality, a more stable ecosystem, higher ecological balance, and lower industrial disturbance. This comparison demonstrates that environmental quality plays an important role in determining heavy metal bioavailability and accumulation in mangrove ecosystem. In conclusion, Belawan show higher Ku accumulation due to intensive industrial and maritime activities. Despite polluted environmental conditions, Rhizopora apiculata demonstrated strong tolerance and the ability to accumulate heavy metals effectively. The very high bioconcentration factor values confirmed that These species function efficiently as both a bioindicator and a phytoremediation agent. Overall, these findings highlight that mangroves are not only victims of pollution, but also natural defenders that help protect and stabilize coastal ecosystem. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope this research can contribute to a better understanding of mangrove conservation and the importance of protecting coastal ecosystem from heavy metal pollution.
Okay, thank you, Miss Dea, for the presentation. And we will now open the discussion session. Okay, please, the participant, you can raise your hand or you can write the question in the chat box, yeah. Okay, in the chat box, there are one question, yeah, from Mr. Hamzah Al-Farizi. Okay. Miss Dea, what is the best regulation or strategy to protect ecosystem, such as planting, phytoremediation, or others? Miss Dea, what is the best regulation or strategy? Can you hear my voice? Hello?
Sorry, I don't hear.
Okay, Miss Dea. Hello? Okay. Can you see the chat box, or I will repeat the question, yeah, from Mr. Hamzah Al-Farizi. What is the best regulation or strategy to protect ecosystem, such as planting, phytoremediation plan or others? Miss Dea?
What is the best regulation or strategy to protect ecosystems such as planting, the remediation plan, or others? Okay. So I'm not have my English. Jadi strategi untuk menjaga ekosistem yang sudah tercemar itu yang pertama bagaimana kita menanam mangrove yang dominan di ekosistem tersebut. Nah, di mana di ekosistem tersebut yang sangat dominan di sana adalah Rhizopora apiculata. Di sana kita bisa melihat bagaimana fitoremediasi yang dihasilkan oleh yang diserap oleh si ekosistem Rhizopora apiculata ini itu sangat dapat menyerap cepat logam beratnya dibandingkan spesies Rhizopora apiculata yang lain. Begitu. Jadi dikarenakan juga Indonesia juga merupakan mangrove terbanyak, yaitu sebesar 28%. Lalu Rhizopora apiculata merupakan 3 dominan di Indonesia, jadi itu merupakan bisa kita buat sebagai penanaman berkelanjutan untuk kedepannya untuk merestorasi logam berat yang sudah tercemar di ekosistem tersebut.
Okay, Mr. Hamzah. Okay, thank you for your answer. Okay, the next question from Miss Amara. Okay, Miss Dia, how do you differentiate between natural heavy metal accumulation and contamination, primarily caused by the anthropogenic activities in the study area?
Oke, baik. Jadi perbedaan bagaimana lingkungan yang natural dibandingkan yang sudah terkontaminasi di area tersebut. Jadi begitu pertanyaannya, Miss Hasita. Maaf.
Yes, but you can try to answer in English, Miss Dea. Can you try answer the question. Hello, Miss Dia.
Sorry, Miss Kasita. Okay. How do you differentiate between natural heavy metal accumulation and contamination primarily caused by anthropogenic activities in study area? Oke. Jadi bedanya ketika lingkungan yang tadinya tidak tercemar dikarenakan aktivitas antropogenik dari baik dari transportasi maupun dari limbah industri yang ada di Belawan dan di Langkat itu sangat berbeda. Jadi dikarenakan juga di Belawan itu ada pabrik Kim atau kawasan industri Medan di mana itu sangat membuat ekosistem mangrove di Belawan itu sangat tercemar dibandingkan di Langkat yang merupakan ekosistem yang bisa kita bilang kontrol karena di sana masih mangrove-nya masih sangat terjaga walaupun ada beberapa aktivitas transportasi laut. Namun dikarenakan di sana merupakan hutan mangrove yang dilindungi, itu bisa dapat menyerap heavy metal yang sudah tercemar di ekosistem tersebut. Dibandingkan di Langkat yang sama sekali ekosistemnya sudah sangat rusak. Begitu, Miss Amara.
Okay, thank you for your explain. Okay, the last question, yeah. Last question from Mr. Yudi Adinata. Miss Dia, can Rhizopora apiculata be effectively used as a bioindicator of heavy metal pollution in coastal ecosystem? Hello, Miss Dia.
Okay, can Rhizopora apiculata be effectively used as a bioindicator of heavy metal pollution? Jadi, Rhizopora apiculata sangat efektif dalam menyerap logam berat yang ada di ekosistem tersebut dikarenakan Rhizopora apiculata memiliki dua akar kompleks, yaitu akar tunjang dan akar pasak, di mana kedua akar tersebut mampu menyaring polutan logam berat yang tersimpan di dalam sedimen di sekitar ekosistem tersebut. Nah, jadi selain itu logam berat yang tersimpan di sedimen yang telah tersaring oleh akar tersebut itu ditarik lagi ke atas melalui jaringan silem dan floemnya melalui batang, lalu diremediasi oleh Rhizopora apiculata tersebut. Begitu.
Okay, Mr. Yudi, has it been answered?
Rhizopora apiculata there is Rhizopora apiculata. It's indicator that this in coastal ecosystem there is heavy metal pollution. Is right?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Yudi and Miss Dia. Okay, that's a good presentation and discussion. Okay, thank you very much. And next, we will proceed to the next presentation. Okay, the next presenter is Gusti Pasa, yeah, with the title Ecological Assessment of Vegetation Dynamic in the Tangkas Lake Ecotourism Area, Muaro Jambi Regency. Mr. Gusti Pasa, are you there? Okay, the operator, please play the video.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, everyone. My name is Gustiari. Today, I will present my research about vegetation identification and inventory in Danau Tangkas Forest. This presentation is prepared for the third international seminar on tropical bioresearch, advancement, and technology, or ISOTOBAT 2026. Indonesia is one of the countries with the highest biodiversity in the world. Around 10% of global plant species are found in Indonesia. In total, it is estimated that Indonesia has around 40,000 plant species. This shows the important role of Indonesia in global biodiversity conservation. So why identify and inventory? Plant identification is important because it helps determine the scientific identity and classification of species. Meanwhile, vegetation inventory provides information about species composition, abundance, and population status. These data are very important for sustainable ecosystem management and conservation. Next, this research was conducted in Danau Tangkas, located in Skernan District, Muaro Jambi Regency. The field survey lasts approximately 3 months, from August until October 2026. Plant samples were identified at Herbarium Andalas University, and the data analysis was conducted in the Plant Ecology Laboratory. Next, the research starts with a field survey to observe environmental conditions. Vegetation sampling used the transect method with purposive sampling. 3 data were collected in 10 by 10 meter plots, while sapling data were collected in 5 by 5 meter subplots. Species identification and data analysis were then carried out in the laboratory. Next, the result showed that tree vegetation consisted of 8 families, 11 genera, 13 species, and 229 individuals. The family Lectitidaceae was the most dominant, while Ebenezer was categorized as codominant. Next, for sampling vegetation, the study recorded 7 families, 8 genera, 9 species, and 155 individuals. Lectitidaceae show very strong dominance, with a dominance index reaching 86%. Next, the important value index, or IV, indicated that Barringtonia cutamula and the Diospyros species had the highest ecological importance in the tree layer. In the sapling layer, Barringtonia cutamula was also the most dominant species. Next, the diversity index for both tree and sampling vegetation was categorized as moderate or medium. Lectitidaceae contribute around 70% of the family composition, while Ebenaceae contribute around 15%. Environmental factors such as salinity, water temperature, pH, and soil texture influence the vegetation structure. Next, in the conclusion, Danau Tangkas Forest has an important role in conserving plant diversity and biological research. Lectitidaceae was the dominant family in both tree and sampling vegetation. Continuous identification, inventory, and environmental monitoring are needed to support sustainable management. So, in the layer brief conclusion, we have 3 conclusions, which were the first is role conservation, the secondly dominant species, and the third recommendation to the next research continue identification, inventory, and monitoring physical factor chemistry for management sustainable. So that's all for me. Thank you everyone very much for your attention. I will be happy to answer any question. Thank you.
Okay, thank
Assalamualaikum
you.
warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Mr. Gusti, for the nice presentation. Okay, we will now open the discussion session. Participant who would like to ask question, you can raise your hand or you can write the question in the chat box. Okay, any question? Are there any question from the audience?
Yes,
Okay.
please. Yes, please. Can I ask something?
Okay, so please.
Okay. Thank you, Bu Kasta. Bu
Okay.
Kasita ya. Sorry,
Yeah,
maaf.
Kasita. Okay.
Uh, this very interesting topic, Pak Pasa. Also from Jambi, actually, but I don't know a lot about the Moro Jambi. My question is, I'm an animal scientist. About the conservation, do you consider about the animal wildlife in the area? That's my question. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Gusti, you can answer the question.
Okay, thank you for your question, Mr. Saitul Fahri.
Yes, I am.
Okay. Your question is about what is I consider to research animal in the area study. Okay, that's very interesting topic, but actually I don't know a lot about the biological species, but in my research, I read before research, they have to study in the animal our side, but in the to focus on the plant, but don't animal. But overall, the research before have already to research about birds, insects, and fish water. Gitu Bapak Saitul Bahri.
Okay, thank you. Okay, maybe can I give suggestion, Ibu Kasita?
Yeah, please,
Yeah,
Mr. Saiful.
Pak Gusti Pasha, I think if you could, I think you can collaboration with wildlife, because I know Jambi we have a special wildlife actually Napu. I don't nobody any province doesn't have that. We have that. I thought if you can consider including the wildlife, maybe collaboration with the other institution, maybe it's very more interesting for your research. That's only suggestion, Pak Gusti. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Saiful. Yeah.
Betul, Bu.
Okay, Mr. Gusti. Yeah. Okay, there are one question from the chat box from Miss Fitri. Were any invasive alien species found growing in your study area, Mr. Gusti?
Okay, thank you for your question, Miss Fitri Kurniawati. Sejauh ini we have done just in my research, the species is truly local species, not invasive. But During our observation, we found several species that can be categorized as invasive or potentially invasive in the study area. These species tend to grow rapidly and compete with native vegetation for space, nutrients, and sunlight. Their presence may influence the ecological balance and vegetation structure in the area. However, the ecological impact in more detail. But in my research, we have don't discover invasive or alien species. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Fitri, has it been answered? Okay, thank you. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Gusti, for the nice presentation and discussion. But the time is up, so we will move to the next presenter. Yeah. Okay. The next presenter is Mr. Hamza Al-Farisi, Siti Sadia, Berry Juliandi, and Tutik Wresdiati, with the title Protective Effect of Acalypha hispida nano extract on hepatic portal vein remodeling and intestinal mucin profile in diabetic rat models. Okay, the operator, please play the video.
I am Hamza Al-Farisi, representing our research team, Dr. Siti Sadia, Dr. Berry Juliandi, and Professor Tutik Wresdiati. I will present our findings titled Protective Effects of Acalypha hispida nano extract on hepatic portal vein remodeling and intestinal mucin profile in diabetic rat models. Diabetes mellitus is one of the most threatening chronic metabolic disease worldwide, with projection reaching 800 million people by 2050. Diabetes is characterized by increasing blood glucose levels above normal or hyperglycemia. Pathophysiologically, chronic hyperglycemia triggers oxidative stress and accumulation of advanced glycation end products. This condition leads to intestinal mucosal damage or leaky gut, which facilitates the translocation of harmful substance into the hepatic portal vein. This influx triggers chronic inflammation and pathological remodeling in the liver, ultimately disturbing the integrity of the gut-liver axis. Our research focused on breaking this chain. Acalypha hispida was selected based on our previous findings, which confirmed its high content of flavonoids and phenolic acids. To address the bioavailability limitation of the crude extract, we developed a nano extract. With an average particle size of 512 nanometers, this formulation is designed to enhance absorption, allowing for optimal efficacy at a significantly lower dosage. The protective effects of this extract on hepatic portal vein fibrosis and intestinal mucin damage remained unreported. The objective of this study aimed to evaluate the effect of Acalypha hispida nano extract on streptozotocin-induced diabetic model rats, focusing on blood glucose profile, hepatic portal vein remodeling, and intestinal mucin profile. This study used male Sprague-Dawley rats induced with streptozotocin. Rats were randomly divided into 5 groups: normal control, diabetic control, metformin, crude extract 300 mg per kilogram, and nano extract at a 10-fold lower dose, 13 mg per kilogram. The treatments were administered for 28 days. We evaluated blood glucose level, portal vein remodeling using Casson's trichrome staining, and intestinal mucin profile via periodic acid sieve and Alcian blue staining. Diabetes induction was successfully established, with blood glucose level ranging between 400 and 450 mg per deciliter. Our research demonstrates that the nano extract significantly reduced blood glucose levels. A key finding is that the nano extract at 30 mg per kilogram exhibited the best efficacy in reducing blood glucose levels compared to metformin and high-dose crude extract. This indicates that reducing the particle size enhances the pharmacological potency of the active compounds. For the hepatic portal vein, histomorphometric analysis showed a significant increase in the wall-to-lumen ratio in the diabetic group. However, administration of the nano extract proved effective in suppressing collagen deposition and significantly reducing the wall-to-lumen ratio, restoring it to near normal levels. These findings provide strong evidence that the nano extract prevents vascular remodeling in the hepatic portal vein. Within the intestinal mucosa, periodic acid shift and Alcian blue staining reveal a severe depletion of the goblet cell population in the diabetic group. Fortunately, the nano extract successfully restored the goblet cell population and mucin density, encompassing both neutral and acidic mucins. These findings indicate a comprehensive restoration of the mucosal barrier. Based on these findings, the nano extract reduced blood glucose and exhibited a simultaneous dual target action, protecting the intestinal mucin profile to prevent leaky gut while concurrently preventing hepatic portal vein remodeling. The convergence of these protective effects mitigates gut-liver axis dysfunction and diabetic complication. At the molecular level, this protection is attributed to the flavonoids and phenolic acids reducing oxidative stress. Another crucial finding is the dose efficiency. The nano extract at 30 mg per kilogram, a tenfold lower dose than the crude extract, exhibited the best efficacy. In conclusion, the Acalipha hispida nano extract significantly reduced blood glucose levels at low dose of 30 mg per kilogram body weight in the diabetic model rat. For dual role by preventing both hepatic portal vein remodeling and intestinal mucin damage, thereby preserving the integrity of the gut-liver axis. That concludes our presentation. I would like to express my sincere gratitude to Kemendikti Saintek and PMDSU program and IBB University for their valuable support. I now welcome any questions and look forward to our discussion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hamzah, for the nice presentation. Okay, we will now open the discussion session. Any question? Any question? Okay. Okay, maybe I have one question, yeah, Mr. Hamzah. Okay, what are the limitations of using animal models in this study, Mr. Hamzah?
Okay, thank you, Miss Kasita. Okay, can you hear my voice?
Yes, yes, I.
Okay, sorry. Good. The question is, there is a limitation of my research. I think there are more future research to test the toxicity for the candidate of drug. Yeah, we know because the diabetic drug is consumed continuously, yeah, by the patients. So we have to test the chronic toxicity, yeah, for for 9 months, yeah. That's maybe for the next research, Ms. Kasita.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hamzah. Okay, maybe this is the last question from the Ms. Amara. This research highlight the protective effect on the good liver exists by preventing hepatic portal vein remodeling and intestinal mucin damage. My question is, are these histopathological change reversible or irreversible after the nano-extract treatment is discontinued? And is there any indication that the protective effect can persist long term? Mr. Hamzah.
Okay, good question. Thank you for the question. That's the good questions. Actually, in my research design, first I induce the diabetic rats. Yeah, so we have the condition of diabetics, and then after that we treated the rats using our extract. Okay, and based on the research, we know that there is reversible of the remodeling in hepatic portal vein. So this extract is potential to develop clinical tests, maybe clinical tests, and developed by the size of the extract, because the size is big. I think we have to have maybe under 100 nanometer for the extract, so we can good availability and efficacy for the extract. I think enough for the answer.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hamzah. Ms. Amara, has it been answered? Is it clear? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
Ibu
thank
Kasita,
you.
Ibu
Yeah.
Kasita, I'm sorry. There's a participant who raised her hand. Ibu Alfi, something.
Okay, Ibu Alfi,
Okay,
please.
thank you. I want to ask only one question. I want to know how you prepare the nano extracts because I think it's correlate with the efficacy of the nano extract compared to the crude extract. Maybe there is correlation why the nano extracts less effective than the crude extract. So I want to know how you prepare the nano extraction. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Alfia. It's a good question. Actually, this research is part of our dissertation, and we prepare this extract used ball milling, Bu. Jadi we use ball milling to reduce the size of extract, but the limitation is the extracts can interact each other. So we have to pre-treatment before we treat it in the rats. So we use the CMC, and then we do the sonication, sonication to make the extract is good size. I think this are my answer.
Miss Alfi,
Yeah,
has it
okay.
been answered?
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, maybe that because the time is up, thank you, Mr. Hamzah, for the nice presentation and discussion. Okay, next we will move to the last presenter. Yeah, last presenter is Paradisika Dimas Andrianto, Taufik Purna Nugraha, and Rahadian Pratama. Yeah, with the title Phenom Diversity of Indonesian Fauna, Composition and Biological Effect on Mammalian System. Okay, the operator, please play the video.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Paradisija. I am a master's student in biochemistry at ITB University. Today, I am honored to present to you our comprehensive review titled Venom, Diversity of Indonesian Fauna, Composition and Biological Effects on Mammalian Systems. Indonesia is recognized as one of the world's mega biodiversity countries and represents a global hotspot of venom diversity. Its ecosystem and geography have promoted the evolution of many venom species, including snakes, lizards, insects, many marine organisms, amphibians, and even mammals. However, compared with Australia or South America, many Indonesian venoms remain underexplored. Fundamentally, venom is a toxic secretion requiring active delivery, like a bite or sting, to manipulate another organism's physiology. This modern definition now extends to include both phytotoxic and sexual venom. At the molecular level, venom is not a single substance, but a highly complex mixture. It is composed of diverse proteins, bioactive peptides, small bioactive molecules, and specific enzymes like PLA2 and various proteases. This composition differs drastically between and within species, influenced by ecological factors such as age, diet, and environment. These adaptations serve vital roles in predation and defense. Today, we will explore this molecular diversity, analyze venom immune system interactions, and highlight the therapeutic potential of these unique molecules. When we examine the cross-taxa chemical diversity within Indonesian fauna, we see a fascinating distribution of major toxin groups. Our data illustrates that enzymatic proteins dominate the landscape, with PLA2 making up approximately 45% of the profile, alongside snake venom metalloproteinase at 15% and serine proteases at 10%. These enzymes are the primary drivers of membrane destruction, tissue hemorrhage, and severe coagulation disorders. Conversely, non-enzymatic components such as 3-finger toxins account for another significant fraction, inducing targeted neurotoxicity and profound immune modulation. We also observe highly specialized secondary metabolites like steroidal bufadionolides in amphibians and exceptionally unique immunogenic proteins, specifically the BGSP and complement 1R proteins found in the venom of mammalian solaris. This structural variety reflects multiple distinct evolutionary strategies developed for predation, physiological manipulation, and defense. This diversity translates directly into systemic toxicological effects. Neurotoxicity accounts for 30%, often leading to paralysis. Untuk hemotoxicity and coagulopathy represent 25% of these pathways, causing severe hemorrhage. We also observe myotoxicity and cardiotoxicity, resulting in muscle necrosis and arrhythmias. Importantly, immune-mediated toxicity makes up 15%, triggering hypersensitivity and anaphylaxis, underscoring the high clinical significance of this compound. Envenomation triggers an immediate innate immune response, causing acute inflammation and a rapid release of pro-inflammatory cytokines. However, the dynamic changes with repeated exposure. Chronic exposure can lead to severe IgE-mediated hypersensitivity reactions, or conversely drive immune dysregulation resulting in immunosuppression and autoimmune-like syndromes. By studying these active immune modulators, we uncover immense biomedical potential. These venom components are now highly promising drug candidates with the potential to target cancer cells and serve as immunomodulatory therapies. To fully realize this biomedical potential, we have to change our future research strategies. We need comprehensive multiomics profiling and a better understanding of intraspecific variation to improve antivenom efficacy. Crucially, we must explore venom-immune interactions. For example, utilizing the Solaris as a novel model for studying allergy and anaphylaxis. Ultimately, our goal is translational, shifting from descriptive studies to integrative research using protein engineering for scalable drug discovery and next-generation antivenom production. In conclusion, the venoms of Indonesian fauna, spanning snakes, amphibians, mammals, and marine organisms, exhibit an extraordinary level of molecular complexity. These bioactive mixtures actively and powerfully interact with the mammalian immune systems, capable of triggering pathways ranging from inflammation to severe anaphylaxis. Yet, it is precisely this high specificity and bioactivity that grants them such profound therapeutic potential. They are the foundation for the future of targeted drug discovery, novel immunotherapies, and also a next generation of antivenoms. By advancing integrative and multidisciplinary research, venom-derived molecules may become valuable tools for future therapeutic innovation. Thank you very much for your attention. I look forward to the discussion regarding this presentation. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Miss Paradiska. Okay, we will move to the discussion, and there are questions in the chat box from Miss Siti Sumiati Solihat. Okay, thank you for the excellent presentation and so informative. Bu Paradisika, how can venom, which we know toxic, cause death, can be utilized and has therapeutic potential, for example, antivenom? Okay, Miss Paradisika, you can answer the question.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, Ibu Siti, for the question. So, although venom is a toxic substance, its component often poses highly specific biological activities and also molecular targets. So, this specificity makes venom-derived molecules being valuable candidate for therapeutic development when their toxic effects are isolated, are modified, or maybe carefully controlled. So, for antivenom production, venom itself is not directly used as a therapeutic drug. Instead, controlled dose of venom are administered into or injected into host animals to stimulate the production of antivenom preparation capable of neutralizing the venom toxins. So, for example, there is serum anti-bisa ular, commonly called SABU, which is used in Indonesia for snake bite treatment. So, in SABU production, selected snake venoms are injected into host animals in carefully controlled dose. The host animals gradually developed antibodies against the venom toxins. So, and these antibodies are later isolated and processed into antivenom formulation for clinical use. So maybe this example demonstrates how toxic molecules can be modified into medical applications through purification, protein engineering, or maybe peptide modification and dose optimization, so that toxic molecules from venom can be transformed into safer compounds.
Okay, thank you. Miss Siti, has it been answered? Miss Siti? Okay, thanks. It's clear. Okay, thank you. Okay, we move maybe the last question, yeah, from Mr. Hamzah Al-Farisi. Miss Paradisika, what is your response that Indonesian people drink venom and eat king cobra snake at street food in Jakarta? Okay, Miss Paradisika.
Thank you very much for the question, Mr. Hamzah. For now, I still don't know about this, about the Indonesian people drink venom directly from the king cobra snake. But I sometimes see in the social media that Indonesian people drink the blood. I I I often see the people. So for me, if we directly drink the venom from the snake, maybe it's not a good choice because when antivenom is product that very process, yeah. There are very much process to become antivenom. So if we drink directly from the venom, maybe it's not that a good idea. Maybe that's it.
Okay, Mr. Hamzah. Okay, thanks. Okay, thank you, Miss Paradisika, for the nice presentation and discussion. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we have now come to the end of the all presentation and discussion in this parallel session. I would like to express our sincere appreciation, yeah, to all presenter, participant, operator, and committee member for the active participation. Okay, thank you for your attention and cooperation. I hope this session has provided useful insight and fruitful discussion for all of us. Okay, finally, I would like to hand the session back to the Master of Ceremony, yeah, Miss Nabila. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, Ibu Kasita. We are truly pleased to have you as our moderator for today's session. However, we will not say goodbye just yet because we still have one more session together in this afternoon. Ya, Ibu. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we will now take a short break until 1:30 p.m. So we will expect you to rejoin this meeting room at 1:30 p.m. But if you want to stay in this Zoom room, it's okay. Just make sure if you want to leave, you can rejoin us at 1:30 p.m. And please make sure that you have completed the attendance